Welcome everyone to today's NEXUS Gains webinar session number 18 that we are holding together with Pakistan Water Week. Under the Pakistan Water Week thematic area on climate resilient pathways, adaptation, mitigation, and sustainable development for a secure Pakistan. Today's session, we need the slide, focuses on the water, energy, food nexus modeling, a FED or future. And we have two exciting presentations, followed by a series of panelists, and again, followed by Q&A. Our first presenter is Dr. Bunyod Holmatov. He's a researcher on data analysis and innovation in water management at the International Water Management Institute, where he focuses on land, water, and carbon footprints of renewable energy systems. He holds degrees from both Yale and University of Twente in Netherlands, and he has co-authored many papers, and today he will talk to us. He'll present a case study using a water, energy, food nexus modeling system for Central Asia, for the Aral Sea Basin, because as we know, to really achieve multiple outcomes across the water, energy, food, and ecosystem or environmental system, we actually do need some tools, including modeling tools, to make sure we are not impeding progress in some systems while achieving programs in other systems. Our goal really is to jointly improve water, energy, and food systems without negative environmental impacts. And so with no further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Bunyod to give his presentation on Central Asia.
Great, thank you very much, Claudia. And I would like to start by thanking the organizers of today's event for the invitation and the opportunity to present at this in today's event. So my name is Bunyod Holmatov. I'm a researcher at the International Water Management Institute. And today I'm going to talk about water, energy, food nexus modeling, applying PyWR in Central Asia. And I'm not going to be talking as much about the technical aspects of the model, but more about the process of applying and what we're learning in the process of applying a nexus model in Central Asia. So when we're talking about Central Asia, we're really talking about 5 Central Asian republics. So these are Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan. So the total population of the region is a little bit less than 80 million people. And we can divide nations in Central Asia into upstream and downstream countries, where the water resources mostly originate from the upstream countries. So Tajikistan and the Kyrgyz Republic jointly provide about 80% of the water flow in the Aral Sea Basin, but most of the use occurs actually in the downstream countries, which are Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and Kazakhstan. And although the Central Asian countries are very much endowed with natural resources, so the upstream countries have a lot of water resources, but the downstream countries have a lot of fossil fuels, which impacts their development stage. So if we look at the GDPs per capita, the downstream countries have a higher GDP per capita compared to their upstream neighbors. But like I said, most of the flow is actually generated in the upstream countries. So Kyrgyz Republic, the mountains in the Kyrgyz Republic provide most of the flow for the Sirdarya River, which is the upper river in this picture, while the Tajikistan's mountains provide most of the flow for the Amudarya River's flow. But although Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan provide most of the flow, they utilize very small compared to the downstream countries. In the downstream countries, for example, Turkmenistan actually withdraws 20 times more water than it contributes in terms of flow. Uzbekistan does so, but to a small smaller, so 3.5 times withdrawal compared to the so it withdraws 3.5 times more than it generates. But in that sense, there are a lot of similarities between Pakistan and Central Asia, because for one thing, agriculture is the largest consumer of water. So around 90% or over 90% in case of Uzbekistan, but so is in case of Pakistan. And like I said, a lot of the flow is actually generated in the upstream countries, but it's consumed by the downstream countries. So there's the downstream Central Asian countries have a high dependence on external water resources. And also the water stress is in the similar level between Pakistan and some of the downstream countries. For example, in case of Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, it's actually higher water stress levels than in Pakistan. So, so how does water, energy, food, environment nexus manifest itself in Central Asia? Well, there are a lot of different ways how it manifests, but I'm going to present one example. So the region has about 1,200 reservoirs, and some of them are large and multi-purpose. And they can operate both for storing water for irrigation, but also for generating electricity. But the electricity mix, the electricity generation mix in the upstream countries is actually based on mostly hydropower, because they don't have so much access to fossil fuels. While the downstream countries, they have enough fossil fuels, so more than 90% of their electricity mix actually comes from fossil fuels. But what it means is that upstream countries want to store their water and release it when it's colder, so during winter, fall and winter times. While the downstream countries, they needed water during vegetation period, which is spring and summer. So then there's a conflict of, you know, when to release water. Is it for irrigation or is it for electricity production? Moreover, the downstream countries are also impacted by the catastrophe of the Aral Sea. So one's fourth largest inland lake is basically disappeared, and it's now split into very small water bodies because of water mismanagement that started in the 1960s when Soviet Union started diverting water from Amudarya and Sirdarya to expand agricultural lands to grow mostly cotton. So what it creates today is the desiccated bed of the former Aral Sea has a lot of sand and also pesticides and other chemicals that accumulated from return flows from agriculture, and they get picked up by winds and can be dispersed into hundreds of kilometers, affecting human health and creating salinization of lands and leading to desertification. So the downstream countries are then interested in also allowing some of the flow from the rivers to actually reach the Aral Sea to at least sustain and maintain the small water bodies that are remaining. But not only that, that's the current level manifestation of the nexus in Central Asia. But going forward, there are also new interventions that are planned by pretty much all countries in the region. For example, all 5 former Soviet republics want to expand their agricultural lands to meet their increasing food security needs. But then there's also need to construct more dams. So the upstream countries, again, want to meet their energy needs, so they want to build more reservoirs. But Afghanistan is now also building Khoshtepe Canal, which would divert from 20 to 25% of the Amudarya River's flow to begin new irrigation lands to meet the food security of their population. But what it means is the canal is going to be a little bit less than 300 kilometers in length, but as you can see in this picture, it's not really a lined canal, so there's a lot of seepage and losses that will occur in the process. And it's all happening in the backdrop of very weak regional cooperation. So the weather nexus challenges will only increase going forward. But so in this sense, the river basins or the water resources, if we look at it, themselves present a very complex systems, but so is energy system and the food system. So regardless of our point of entry, we would need to understand how any type of interventions would affect the dynamics of these different systems. So the models, in that sense, help to simplify very complex information and help us understand benefits and trade-offs of some sort of interventions into these complex systems. But what we did very recently is we reviewed very large collection of NEXUS publications. So with our current and former IVME colleagues, Jonathan Lautze, Stefan Uhlenbrook, and myself. And when we looked at the very large collection of NEXUS publications, we actually found that NEXUS modeling is actually not in short supply. There are over 100 studies that used or applied NEXUS modeling. And the other general observations that we saw from our review is that NEXUS is still driven by the water sector and that stakeholders are not engaged enough. But the most importantly, there are very few practical outcomes. So there's less than 3% of reviewed documents actually report some sort of on-the-ground change. So meaning the NEXUS is still very much staying theoretical. So we're talking about 14 outcomes from more than 700 publications that we reviewed. So now moving into the actual modeling. So under NEXUS Gains, which is a CGIAR initiative, we're applying a NEXUS approach to realize multiple benefits across water, energy, food, and ecosystems. And it consists of 5 different work packages, but specifically under work package 1, we're focusing on modeling NEXUS trade-offs and benefits. And for that, we're using Python water resources to model multi-scenario simulation to understand impact of future interventions in different basins around the world, including in Central Asia. And PyWR development is led by the University of Manchester. It's a model for solving network resource allocation problems at discrete time steps using a linear programming approach. What it does is it helps to track resource stocks and flows within the system. And it, when we're talking about PyWR, we're specifically talking about water resource module, which includes hydropower. But we can also add other modules for energy and food. So we started by applying this PyWR model to the Amu Darya River Basin. This is work in progress. Because it's a large river basin, we started encountering some of the challenges that I want to share with you. One of them is, because a lot of the water infrastructure was built during Soviet times, some of even gauging stations don't work anymore. So there's very limited data to actually get observed data. But because it's also transboundary river basin, it's equally difficult to access the data because it's dispersed between different organizations in different countries, between different sectors. And we don't want to necessarily collect the data of dubious quality and to make decisions, right? So we need to validate and calibrate it. But that's becoming difficult because having a stakeholders buy-in and cooperation is difficult. The first question they ask is, okay, can you show us how your model works? Can you show us some of the results? So we're in like catch-22 situation where we cannot show it without necessarily validating, calibrating our model. So what we started doing is actually started applying the same PyWR model to a smaller river basin called the Chirchik River Basin. It's actually a tributary of the Sirdarya River Basin. It's very small. Most of it is located in Uzbekistan with a small part of the watershed extending into Kazakhstan. But what we found in this process is that the small scale is practical. So there is better data availability, and we're also collaborating with Scientific Information Center of the Interstate Committee on Water Cooperation, which is a parity collective body of Central Asian states. And we can also show the results to expedite stakeholder buy-in and support for larger scale outcomes. So what we're doing is building this smaller model so we can have result simulations to show the capabilities of the model and hopefully have the buy-in from the stakeholders and apply it at a larger basin. So the lessons learned that I would like to share with you is that with NEXUS analysis and modeling, there are a lot of publications, but not many outcomes. So it's a lot about learning by doing. So we have to keep doing, because the NEXUS concept itself is very new. It's a little over a decade old. So if we think about IWRM, it took decades for the principles for different guidelines to improve. And then another lesson learned is that the small scale may be practical to start. We understand WEF NEXUS is about different systems, but the systems are human constructs. So human body can be a system, but so is a solar system, so is Earth, so is a river basin. So we can look at systems, but at a smaller level, smaller scale. And stakeholder involvement is very crucial. Good quality data is also possible with stakeholders' collaboration. And we also need to share experiences and outcomes, so the social learning. That's why I'm sharing these experiences with you today, so we have more knowledge about how these new type of modeling challenges look like. And then in the process, from the very beginning, it's important to think of who will be using the model, because NEXUS is not just about governance or the technical, it's about both. So we need to understand and quantify trade-offs and benefits, but then the actual implementation and bringing to life would be done by some of the actors whom we need to identify now. And then, like I said from the beginning, it's a new concept, so new challenges. Be patient along the way. With that, I would like to thank you for your attention.
Thanks so much, Bunyod, for this excellent presentation. I think I saw a lot of really interesting insights for Pakistan, and it was great that you made the comparison yourself. I think one of the most interesting statements was that water scarcity and pressure is even higher in Central Asia than in Pakistan. And so I think there's a lot of learnings that Pakistan can gain from understanding how Central Asia is handling water scarcity challenges. It was also interesting to learn that almost all the water is being used in irrigation, like in Pakistan. Even the cropping pattern sounds quite similar. Every sector wants more water. There's a huge danger upstream that in this case, Afghanistan is building a new canal and just removing up to 25% of all of the water in the main river. You know, that's a very interesting existential challenge for the downstream countries linked to the Amu Darya River. Then we also heard about transboundary data challenges, intersectoral data challenges. And then, of course, I think going back to the main question of this session, and the main topic is, modeling of this very complex water, energy, food, ecosystem health system, or system of systems. Is that the future, or is it only a fad? And I think your response was patience. It is here to stay, but we have a lot more to do, a lot more to learn, and it takes a long time to go from modeling to outcomes and to actually changes in policies and investments. So I think this is excellent. So we now come to our second second speaker, Dr. Steve Davis. He is with the International Food Policy Research Institute, but now as a non-resident fellow. He used to live here in Pakistan for many years, working on the USAID Pakistan Agriculture Capacity Enhancement Project in Islamabad. He's also an emeritus professor of agriculture and resource economics at Colorado State University. I think he worked on the national water policy of Pakistan in 2018, and we've heard that policy mentioned in one of the previous sessions. And he's also was a member of the Friends of Democratic Pakistan's Water Sector Task Force. So I think, yeah, a lot of deep knowledge about Pakistan's water resources. And he's going to focus his talk using a yet different water energy food systems model, more an economic focused model. And he focuses on the potential of a policy change in terms of changing cropping patterns and what that can do, I think, for some Nexus outcomes in Pakistan. So please, Dr. Steve Davis, over to you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks very much for this opportunity to present this work. It's actually gotten me down the road a little faster to have to get up and do this presentation. Let's just get right into it so there's plenty of time to talk. As Claudia said, what we're trying to do is look at releasing water from high delta crops for other beneficial uses. And so if we think about the water, food, energy nexus, we're kind of sketching out kind of some links in a fairly detailed way. So we're going from crops to water use to getting water out of agriculture. And that sketches aspects of water use that are or of the water, food, energy nexus. We're doing this, as she said, from the view of a computable general equilibrium model. I think I don't really need to talk too much about the overview and the objectives. We talked a lot this morning about rising demands for non-agricultural uses with population, with environmental, with climate change. And one way to kind of summarize that would be to say that in the next couple decades, perhaps 10 million acre feet needs to come out of agriculture and be available for other uses. So reflecting that, the bottom paragraph there says, recent interest from the Ministry of Water Resources and other stakeholders has led us to do this analysis. And basically we're going to look at what are the effects of reducing sugarcane and rice acreage to the tune of 15% of its acreage. What do we get for that? And do we get close to this 10 million acre feet? And what are some of the other benefits and costs? So given that we're talking about models, I need to just say a couple seconds about it. A CGE model is a whole economy model. And it ties together producers, consumers, governments, trade. All these financial flows go through that model. It uses a set of equations and economic assumptions about the behavior of producers and consumers to create this model. So it's an economic model. We tie it to a hydrology model. And the hydrology model was originally developed for the Indus Basin model revised with WAPTA and the World Bank and other participants later on. So that ties basin inflows with losses. Then we have water going into cropping, 125 BCM is what they say here. There's also groundwater that goes into the cropping system, and those two end up as irrigation and ultimately beneficial crop use, okay? So that's another piece of this model. And there's an interface which translates financial flows into quantities and back. All right, so that's the model. It's a long-term IFPRI endeavor. IFPRI has worked on these CGE models for a long time, and they have been used progressively for more nutrition, environmental purposes, along with traditional trade and production things. Okay, so here's the way the results look, and I don't, this is late in the afternoon for this graph. I will concede that right now, but I'm not going to ask you to really look at it. Let's just look at the columns. So the columns say we have 2014, that's our base, okay? We simulated up to 2030, 16 years, okay? 2030 is sort of the end of our evaluation period, and so we made that as the ending date. So we have this base run, you get changes in the water use. This is water use, millions of acre feet, in a whole different set of crops. Then we went through and we, first of all, reduced rice acreage by 15%. And we got a lot of effects. And those effects show up in this, in the second or the fourth and the fifth columns. Do the same thing for sugarcane. Those show up in the next set of columns. And then finally, we bring them both together and we simulate those. And that's the last set of columns. So the difference relative to the base is what's listed in those diff columns. The thing that I want you to pay attention to is the numbers at the bottom row. So for example, a 15% decrease in rice leads to a 1.31 release of water from agriculture to be available for other purposes, okay? That's the idea, that's what we're looking at. Now, already interestingly, what happens with sugarcane? You reduce sugarcane and you get a growth in water use. And the contention there, in my mind, is that you've opened up 2 seasons of land. So you now get multiple crops and you get actually more water use and more economic activity, which we'll show other ways. So that's the second thing. Okay, so this is what we're going to look at, but we're going to look at it in a more manageable way given the time of day, okay? First of all, you need to know what it took to get this done. We taxed these commodities. I mean, that's how we pushed acreage out. We created taxes. And you can see that rice, we did it separately for basmati and Erie rice, and they were both 30-some%. That we had to raise the taxes in order to push 15% of the acreage out. So that's the mechanism. Even more for sugarcane. We had to go up to 44% tax on sugarcane prices in order to push 15% out. I think that's, my feeling is that, again, because sugarcane crosses 2 seasons, you have to make it incompetitive with a whole bunch of crops, both Rabi season and Kharif season crops. So you end up having to put a big tax in order to push 15% out, okay? And then the combination was more or less the same. So that's what we did to get these acres pushed out. All right, here's the bottom line in the most aggregate sense. We look at the 3 different simulations. The blue bars are without climate change. So this is, I'm imposing this 15% acreage restriction without climate change. As Claudia said this morning, we get almost 2 million acre feet released from agriculture by reducing rice acreage by 15%. That's a big number. Even more so if we do both of them. The big blue one over there is 3.2. If we put taxes on both of them, we can push 3.2 million acre feet out of agriculture. But, okay, as I showed before, sugarcane actually, even in the base scenario, uses more water. So if you get rid of sugarcane, you put in more other activities, there's more water use, so the water use actually goes up. But look what happens with climate change. With climate change, all those excesses that we can use for other things disappear. It's just the heat and evaporation that is required to produce agricultural crops means that there's less left over. And so with the same tax structure, we don't have this excess water left over. We can also look at it in terms of different commodities. And this is the simulation where we did both sugarcane and rice together. And if you don't have climate change here on the left, naturally in each of the provinces, OP is actually other provinces, it's both KP and Baluchistan. the stuff goes down, it goes down because we put taxes on, right? And so we pushed water out of rice and we pushed water out of sugarcane. Most of it went out from Punjab, but pretty substantial amounts went out from Sindh and smaller amounts from the other provinces. What happens a lot in this model is that when you push it out of some crops, it tends to want to go into other crops first. And the three that are big beneficiaries from this are wheat, cotton, and other, which is a whole group of fodder, pulses, fruit, and vegetables, okay? So those three benefit a lot. You can see that there's a lot of movement in Punjab into cotton and into other crops when you push it out of sugarcane and rice, a little bit into wheat. When you go over with, in the second one where we have climate change, the whole thing is different. There's a lot less movement, there's a lot less residual to be moved around, okay? And then finally, I'll just do a couple of these. There's a lot of extension substitution. You go out of one crop, you go into another crop. So just for example, in the first one, if we drop rice acreage by 15% in Sindh, 0.41 million acre feet go out of rice, okay? But it goes into fruit. 0.3 goes back into fruit, into another crop. Well, that's generally good, right? We're moving into a higher valued product. And then in the end, about a quarter of it, 13.13 MAF is released. So a small amount relative to the original decrease in water use in rice is ultimately released. If you go down to the last one here, sugarcane, how much time do I got? 3 minutes? Okay, I will almost make it. When sugarcane acreage drops 15% in Punjab, you get a huge amount of acreage comes out, 3.18 million acre feet comes out of sugarcane. 1.35 goes back into rice. So you're not, when you do one of these, you're in fact getting water is routing back into another high water intensive crop. And also another million acre feet goes into cotton and 1.5 goes into high valued crops. And then 1.0 million acre feet is added. So in the end, you're absorbing more water in agriculture when you drop these acreage out, and there's a lot of shifts in water between major crops. Okay. We did some technical stuff to show what the numbers I've been showing you so far are consumptive use. So we have to back it out to applied levels. And we backed it out here in these three things. So that 3.15, that was the original one from sugarcane and rice together. At the applied level, that's 6.25. The big one is a tax, which I'm going to show you about in a minute. 4.35 consumptive use gives 8.63 applied water. That's almost what we were looking for. I mean, this set of taxes seems to do the job. It's expensive, they're high taxes, but it is quite I was surprised it got that close, frankly. Okay, so a couple other things. Production. There is something we can tabulate in this model. Rice goes down by 15%. We get a 30 billion rupees reduction. It's not a big one relative to the size of the economy. It goes up in sugarcane, again, from this shifting to multiple crops when you get rid of the sugarcane. And when you put them together, it's sort of a balance. There's also, we can see the impact on income distribution. And here, these are really tiny for a whole bunch of reasons. But you can see that if we decrease sugarcane, there's in fact a gain to farm households. The direction at least is right, okay? And there's losses to the non-farm households mainly because they're seeing higher prices and they're not benefiting from the income in agriculture. They're benefiting from this sugarcane change to multiple crops, okay? And then finally, there's a nutritional effect, and this is something we have in there. It's also small, but when you push sugarcane out, actually when you push any of them out, sugar consumption goes down. So this, the very bottom one is discretionary, and that's sugarcane. So there's a % reduction in people's consumption of sugar. That's a good thing, okay? There's some other complications I won't worry about. Okay, last one. We don't have to tax sugarcane and rice. We can tax a lot of other things. And so I just do some examples here to get a flavor for how well these things work. So the left-hand one is, oh, there we go. The left-hand one is, keep going. One more. I'm ahead of you. One more. Yes, good. Okay. So the left-hand one is the combined sugarcane and rice. That leads to this 3.15 million acre-feet release of water without climate change. Okay? If I instead, because it's so much is going over into cotton, if instead I do a 30% tax on cotton, sugarcane, and rice, in fact, I get more out. And that's where I get the top number. And actually, the charge is a little bit lower, right? I mean, politically, these numbers are really disastrous, obviously. But this is a little better, and it actually releases quite a bit of water. Another interesting one was fertilizer. Took out all the other taxes, just taxed fertilizer to the tune of 35%, and we get in the same ballpark. So Arif Anwar used to say that why don't we tax fertilizer as a proxy for taxing for water? And it looks like it's doing it. So I was surprised, honestly. I didn't think it was going to do anything. And then the last one was, well, maybe we should tax them based on the crop water requirements. So I did some scaling there. So we want to penalize those who use too much water, right? It came out more or less the same. There are changes in which crops benefit and lose, but I don't really want to go into that. So with that, last bit is it possible to get significant water out of agriculture with appropriate strategies and policies? Yes, but it depends on how much substitution goes on into other agricultural crops. Because if that's low, then it's easier to get water out. If it's high, then it's much tougher to get out. The strength of demand for better nutrition drives up the demand within agriculture, the choice of policies as you could see before, and then the nature of climate changes. If as the simulation we used, it's a hot, dry simulation, then you're going to have a lot of trouble getting water out of agriculture. And so depending on how these play out, the required cost to reduced acreage will either be higher or lower. So in other words, these tax rates could go down if there's not so much climate change, or they might go up otherwise. And then the tax rates needed, you can think of them as an opportunity cost that needs to be covered. So even if you don't want to charge taxes, somehow to get that acreage out, you're going to have to cover that kind of cost. Okay? And that's a thank you very much, and look forward to your comments. Thanks. Yeah, sure.
Yeah, thanks so much for this second very interesting talk using a different water energy food nexus modeling system and specifically analyzing one potential policy objective for Pakistan, which is freeing up some water from irrigation, as all the other sectors also want more water. So I think lots to discuss with this particular second potential modeling system. But now, before we actually go into the Q&A, we will hear from our panelists, and we have an exciting panel that has come together today. And I'd like to please invite our panelists up to the stage, starting with Professor Dr. Bushra Yasmin. She's a distinguished economist with a wealth of academic experience of more than 25 years. She currently holds the position of Professor in the Department of Economics at Fatima Jinnah Women's University. Dr. Buscher, could you please come to the stage? Do we have mics or? Oh yeah, we have mics, so we're good. Our second panelist is Dr. Dr. Chema. He has more than 20 years of experience with the International Water Management Institute, with a focus on hydrological modeling and precision agriculture. And he will, I think, can also give us some deep insights based on the water systems modeling that he does, relation to this overall question, if this kind of modeling is a fad or the future, and the examples that we have heard. Our third panelist is Dr. Imran Saqib Khalid. He's an environmental and climate governance expert with more than 15 years of experience, and he's currently working as a director of governance and policy at WWF. So I think the environmental flow perspective is very important in all of those models. And I think if we would have requested higher environmental flow, we would have given them some value. Maybe the water would not have flown from sugar into rice, but into environmental flow. So let's see what we hear about that. Our next panelist is Professor Dr. Ikrar Ahmad Khan. He's the Vice Chancellor of the University of Agriculture Faisalabad, and he has played a pivotal role in shaping agriculture policies, fostering gender mainstreaming, and enhancing research grants in Pakistan. And finally, last but not least, our last panelist is Dr. Bashir Ahmad, a professional hydrologist with more than 25 years of professional experience, and he's currently serving as the Director of Climate, Energy, and Water Research Institute at the Pakistan Agriculture Research Council. So welcome to our esteemed panelists, and I'll just pick you with a couple of questions. At the same time, feel free, to also suggest, bring in your suggestions and responses in relation to what you have just heard in those two presentations. And I'd like to start with Professor Buscher Yasmin, and I'd like to hear a bit your opinion. What do you think about these modeling systems? What can they do, and what do they fail to do when we talk about the smallholder farmers and poor farmers? We have heard that there are substantial poverty challenges in Pakistan, food insecurity challenges. So how can we use these modeling systems to support poor farmers? Over to you, please.
Thank you so much. When we talk about WEF, there have been a lot of debate on that so far. When I was going through the literature, and I realized that it is a very promising conceptual framework, but the application is limited. But today, after listening to Steve and earlier presentation, I know it's equally applicable, and we are using it at micro and macro level both. When we look at the SDGs, if we see the SDG number 1, 2, 6, 7, and 12, all focused actually on this nexus. Either it's relevant to no hunger, zero hunger, no poverty, clean water, and whatever. So WEF actually has taken the center stage to understand the resource ecosystem. And what I have learned that WEF nexus actually based on the four items: innovation, context, collaboration, and implementation. And when it comes to from the context of the urbanization, like we see earlier that due to population growth, due to pandemic, and due to climate change, these are all the threats, and these non-traditional threats actually are very smoothly transmitting into the traditional human security threat for the humanity, and due to scarcity of resources, especially the water, energy, and food. So what we need, we need to have a balanced top-down and bottom-up approach. I think we have a number of micro and macro studies, and we need to have more focus on the meso approach, that looking at the regional disparities and learning from the what has been experienced by one region, and how we can rationally apply it to cover the gaps or identify the gaps in other regions. Similarly, we need to see it from the socio-political context, and we need to combine the quantitative and qualitative data to advance interdisciplinary and mixed method approach, because the climate change also is a cross-sectoral and multi-dimensional phenomenon. Coming to the second part of your question, for the farmers, what we need, we actually need to engage them because they are the main stakeholders and we have to take their opinions. Secondly, we need to break the silos. So far, we have been working on both the climate change as well as on the WF Nexus. But sometimes I feel that we need to break those silos and we need to integrate all the efforts. We need to bring them on the common platform, and then that should be accessible for the small farmers as well. Uh, 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 Similarly, this, we need to improve the extension services for the small farmers, and they have to have some alternate income resources, especially in the wake of some pandemics on the climate change, and they should be made the part of the consultation process or having some realistic outcomes and deliverables. Similarly, they can be crop insurance, and we need to move toward the climate smart technology. I was reading that World Bank has financed $200 million financing for the climate smart technology, and we need to make the small farmer the part of that as well. And there is another Punjab Resilient and Inclusive Transformation Project that again focus on increasing the agricultural productivity through efficient and equitable access of water to particularly to the small farmers, both at their community level and at the household level. And they have also emphasized on the private sector engagement for the water conservation and agricultural productivity. And last but not the least, from the farm level, what they can do, what they are already doing, that they are trying the changing crop pattern, they are trying to change their management practices and techniques, advanced use of land, and they are also going for the viable alternate option for their income. So overall, I can say that we need to improve our meal. We need to improve the monitoring, evaluation, accountability, and learning, and also to have a close observation network to track the outcomes of all those climate change adaptation that can be helpful for the small farmers. Thank you.
Okay, excellent. I think you really covered the key aspects that we need to bring in if you're serious about using those models for smallholder farmer adaptation. So could you just tell me thumbs up, not sure, or down? Should these models stay? Should they continue to be used? Should they be expanded?
Actually, what we need, what I personally feel, because when I was going through the literature, I observed that number of studies are there. But even my own PhD student work on the efficiency, and we have applied the parametric and non-parametric approach to find out the efficiency. Similarly, the CG model approach and number of, but these are much complicated approach. I feel we need to make it simplify, and this should be comprehensible to the small farmers. Even the normal farmers, they don't understand what are these figures and what does this say. If we are saying that this is the high number, so they are performing efficiently, and what are the external factors that led to cut it down or reduce this efficiency. So
good. I give it this side. Yeah, it's not a up and it's not a full down. I'd say sideways. Sideways. Very good. Good. So, Dr. Chema, you'll see that question will come to you as well at the end. But so yeah, can you maybe come in from the water modeling side into this Nexus modeling questions? We had two different water systems models being presented. You have another one, or you use yet a different model. So yeah, just tell us a bit, what are your thoughts in terms of, what do these water models need to include for useful, easily understandable, and impactful Nexus modeling and analysis and impact? Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, and that's really very important question as well. I mean, as far as we modelers are concerned, we are doing a lot of modeling, but it's like water modeling is at the one side, then people are doing energy modeling as well as this food modeling. So there was a lack of nexus in it. I mean, when I started my journey of being a water scientist, I did a lot of water modeling. It was groundwater modeling as well as surface water modeling, but there was no nexus within that. I mean, energy and food as well. But now when we are evolving in it, and then we are actually working this NEXUS Gains project as well, and we came up with new ideas that like this only surface water modeling is not the solution for we should go for a holistic approach. So it's not only one solution. I mean, we have to consider the other different scenarios as well as different aspects of this system into the consideration. And similarly, we are actually working on this PIWR on which Bunyad was also talking about. So we're taking into account this energy, power generation, energy, as well as then the food production as well. So when we are taking into consideration those aspects of the basic value chain and basic food chain, then these models could be of some use. I mean, otherwise it's just only model for model. And when I was looking at the presentation of Steve as well, we were seeing that how we can actually reduce this percentage of water use in rice and sugarcane. That's again, I mean, it's a debatable thing. And so we are actually looking into different aspects of that modeling setup. So I mean, in a sense, what we are actually doing, like me, I'm doing this SWOT plus modeling, and then we are going to see the futuristic water needs as well when we are talking about the climate change scenarios. So those scenarios will also be taking into consideration. So all this food and then climate change and all those things will be worked as a nexus, and then we can have some good numbers that can be debatable with the policymakers as well, and with other even with the farmers. Yeah.
And yeah, what's your assessment? Thumbs up, down, or sideways?
Well, I will go for thumbs up, because I mean, what we are seeing, like previously it was thumbs down, but now what all the scientists and the research community, they are actually thinking on it, because like 10 years back when I was went to the fellowship for the Stimson Center, sir, over there we have a good study and research of the policy and science papers, and there was either very small sort of interlink with the policies and the scientific work. But now the things are being changed. The people are thinking holistically. They are actually trying to find some smart solutions, and now the things are moving forward.
Okay, great, thanks. So okay, good to know. We have two responses, and now we move to environment. And yeah, Dr. Khalid, the term environmental flow wasn't mentioned extremely prominently at the session. During those presentations, we have another session specifically focusing on that sector, but it is an important sector. It's sometimes a bit challenging to give it an economic value. So yeah, what's your opinion on the, we call it WEF nexus or WEF nexus, the environmental systems in this modeling? Yeah, what's your opinion? Should we do this modeling? Is it working? How do we need to do better? Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I really wanted to be a part of the environmental flows panel as well, but another colleague of mine from WWF is participating in that. So because it's something that's close to my heart. So when Steve was talking about the 10 million acre feet, that's they're trying to save. I think that was the figure. Automatically, my mind went to the allocation accord between the provinces, and how we've said that 10 million acre feet below Kotri. This is a figure that comes up a lot. This is below Kotri barrage, 10 million acre feet needs to go, or supposedly that's the requirement on an annual basis, but it's never met. It's met because on an average basis. I mean, when there's a flood season, water does go down, and then they say, look, over the past 5 years, we've been meeting that. But on an annual basis, we don't do that. So when you highlighted that, Steve, I was thinking, how wonderful it would be if we could take that water and allow it to go down below Kotri to meet the environmental needs of the delta. We talk about equity a lot. So here, we're talking about the ecological well-being, the fisheries, the farming communities that depends on it, and we are also seeing how climate change is impacting, right? So climate change means sea level rise. Without a freshwater flow coming into the delta, seawater inundation is taking place, which means clean freshwater drinking water supplies are becoming salty. People are having to migrate. So there's a knock-on effect. So yes, that the excess amount of water, if we are able to save it, can be utilized with perhaps another crop, but I think when it comes to the delta, it's the impact could be quite high. Especially now when we're talking about carbon markets and how mangroves have a role to play. This is something that's been in discussion a lot over the past couple of weeks because Pakistan is investing in the mangroves, and we think that because of how carbon accounting works, we can benefit from that. But we need to understand that even mangroves require freshwater and saltwater mix. So in that regard, this will be quite useful. As to the question that you've been asking all other colleagues as well, I think perhaps I would go sideways. I mean, it's definitely not not a thumbs down, but I think we can improve on it. So the indicators that are being made available and that we are working on, there are some experts working on it who've got a long-term experience, but are we really going down to the communities? Are we going down to the local government level, going down to the ground essentially, and trying to address the needs of the ecosystem in a broader manner, rather than just looking at it in a vacuumed way, whereby you're saying, look, this is the amount of water and this is how much we need, but how are people using it? What are we accounting for the conflicts? Are we accounting for the political decision making that goes in, and that sort of a thing? And I'm not really sure whether that can be done in an easier manner, but it does need to be accounted for in our models. And if we can do that, then our models will definitely be more useful moving forward.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for even answering my question before I ask it. This is excellent. And I agree, bringing in ecosystem health into those modeling systems is it's really a very complex task, but we just have to get to that. Yeah. Because otherwise, we have no drinking water and we're destroying our environment if we don't give it the value that it has and we don't reflect it in those modeling systems. So now we move to food and agriculture. Professor Khan, so what is your assessment from what you have heard? In both Central Asia and in Pakistan, 90% of the water goes into food production, and not just food, fiber. We talk about cotton, very bad food like sugarcane. So what do we need to do differently, and do those Nexus models give us a hint or a help, or do we need to do this very differently, because we know we have to move some water out of agriculture. There's just no future otherwise. It has to happen. Over to you.
Thank you. First of all, unfortunately, I only attended one presentation, Steve's presentation. I missed the first presentation. But before joining this session, I had something made up in my mind, which changed after Steve's presentation. I have to confess at the outset that neither am I an engineer or an economist, so I don't know anything about modeling. But I have a model in my mind, which will be actually rebuttal to Steve. If everything goes my way, I would like to tax, but I don't know if taxing in Pakistan goes that easy. So my model is productivity model. And forgive me if some of the figures are wrong, because I'm speaking out of my head without preparation. We currently have the cropped area oscillating between 50 to 55 million acres. And about 20% of that is rain-fed. So around 45 million acre is irrigated agriculture in Pakistan. Am I right? Okay. Now, out of that, 22 millions are under wheat, and about 8 to 9 fluctuates under rice. And my friends, colleagues of Dr. Chima tell me that these two crops put together consume more than 60% of irrigation water. So even though sugarcane, rice, and maize are known to be high delta water crops, actually wheat is the biggest consumer. Because of area and poor irrigation practices. Today I asked I don't know if you can put it, I asked my water management director to send me something latest. Nadeem sent me this, and he said to me that we are calculating that this is around 6 inches of irrigation on first core. 6 inches of irrigation on first core.
Instead of 4 or 3.
Instead of 1.
Yes.
Instead of 1. So, yes, we need to reduce area under sugarcane and rice, but actually we are wasting more water on wheat than anything else. Now, I'm not supporting rice and sugarcane, but I think the culprit lies in wheat. Now, there's political economy of the food security, and the two biggest political economy actors are the wheat flour millers and sugar millers. And my model is productivity model. The model says that our average is hovering around 3 tons per hectare, which is locally called as 32 mands per acre. Whereas across the board, the progressive grower is getting 50 plus. So we call this as extension gap. So it's no new research required, no new natural source required. It's only putting the agronomy or the management together that it can jump from 30 to 50. Now research gap is still much higher. Research gap says 70 to 90. But the current extension gap is nearly 80%. So when you talked about shifting acreage, the easiest and low-hanging fruit to shift acreage is to work on the productivity of wheat, and acreage of wheat must come down first. And if the acreage of wheat comes down, which I believe if out of 80% gap, if we achieve 50% of that, which is 40% gap, that 40% gap would be enough to reduce wheat acreage by 5 million acre, 5 to 7 million acre. 5 to 7 million acre reduction means plenty of acreage for edible oil, which is the biggest edible commodities import, $5 billion US. $1 billion goes into soybean import. And it is now written on the wall that our current cotton, which you want to give a little bit more credit, is not going to survive. The current cotton is 200 days longer crop. In 200 days, it sees 4 shifting seasons. And those 4 shifting seasons, the pest complex is simply unpredictable. And that is the major reason that farmer has given up on cotton and moved to less risky crops, which are rice, corn, and sugarcane. So we have to come up with a new cotton strategy because country's economy cannot survive without cotton. And that cotton strategy is 120 days cotton. 120 days cotton is possible if you remove the wheat acreage and start producing cotton from February. And that will be over before even the pest will arrive. 120 days means February to end of May, early June,
Okay.
there's no pest.
Okay, I think this is already great, but we do have.
Okay, no, I want to give him rebuttal. And if your presentation is not IP protected, we would like to, actually we are currently preparing some prescriptions for Punjab government. And I'll ask Dr. Chima to share your presentation with us. We can actually, I would like to propose your recipe. And it is model which probably has a lot of wisdom in it down the road. Climate. The best adaptation to climate is shorter duration and heat resilience. Water comes after that.
Okay.
Shorter duration.
Excellent. Okay, now the other question. Up, side, down. You don't have to explain your up. Oh, it didn't sound like that at the beginning, but okay, we have it up. Very good. We come to our last panelist, Dr. Ahmad, and that's my question is on climate change. That's why I didn't want you to give the full climate change answer. What is your thinking? We saw Steve's presentation with or without climate change. The results were 100% different. We just heard a lot about climate change issues and pests and disease on cotton. So does climate change make these models more useful, less useful, more needed? What is your opinion? Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think climate change is a reality and it's affecting all sphere of life and especially agriculture. and we need to have a consideration, and modeling can be a good tool to have some future assessment and to make adjustment in our water management. As a lot of studies shows a reduction in, I mean, overall there would be a more same amount of rainfall, but its form can be changed, as well as maybe more rainfall. But rainfall, more intense rainfall, and maybe some shift in terms of the rainfall. So our water management, we need to make adjustment for that one. In terms of intense rainfall, so we need to enhance our storage capacities to carry forward water for the crops. But in terms of, we have been historically, three-fourths of the country, like the Balochistan and some part of the country, have been the arid region. But from latest studies and from the last 1.5 decade, evidence is there, as well as many of the studies show that there would be more rainfall in the southern part of the country, and 2022 flood is the evidence for that one. And we need to focus in those areas, rain-fed areas, where many studies show that about 15 to 16 million acre feet water is generated into the Rokhoi area, and which we could harvest only 1%. But new studies show that about 40 to 50 million acre feet. So we need to have more concentration on rainwater harvesting, as well as new irrigation, as well as agriculture sector in those areas. Which will not only we can mitigate the floods, but we can have a agriculture economy in those areas, especially with the new kind of irrigation system, drip irrigation system, and all other innovative irrigation system. Because there have been some water storage, but unfortunately their command area or water use is highly inefficient. So we need to improve agriculture or irrigation water efficiency in those areas.
Okay.
Thank you.
Excellent. And now the same question. What do you think about those models? Should we down, sideways, up?
Yeah, I have been a modeling guy, but I have from the last 10 years completely shifted
You gave
from
up.
modeling to the practice as well as the solution. Yeah, we can say we must have a mix up, as Dr. Chima said, that with the NEXUS model, it shouldn't be isolation, either the water modeling or you can say crop modeling. So it should be a NEXUS approach as well. Yeah.
Up. Okay, we have another up. Very good. Okay, great. So really excellent panel. If you could just give a hand for the panelists. But this is not over, because now it's up to you and the questions you have for both the panelists and the presenters. So we take questions for both. So anyone had any question to any of the panelists or to any of the presenters with different modeling systems, Central Asia or Pakistan? Please raise your hands.
I have a question for Steve.
Okay, good. We have 3 hands now. We start in the room and then we move back here. Yes, please. And please introduce yourself as well.
From WWF.
Okay.
So the thing is that always modelers are researching sometimes that the dry place will be more drier, the wet place will be more drier. So my question is from the modelers, even the panelists or the participants, that the dry place in Sindh is getting more wetter, the dry place in Balochistan is getting more water, the wet place in the Gilgit-Baltistan is going slowly or fastly to the dry place. So my question is, the models are wrong, or the situation or the climate change is wrong? So
climate is probably unpredictable, but who do you ask this question? Anybody. Okay, that was a difficult question. So second in front, sorry, we had a question in front row here. Yeah.
Okay, so Muin Bartley from SERP. It's fascinating, and I guess what I am interested in is how to engage the government with models such as these. So, so it's a tough, tricky, sensitive area. So, what would be the way to engage the federal government as well as the provincial governments with these sorts of models, their sort of predictions, because to avoid a big reaction and avoid sort of not having a productive engagement.
Okay. Yep. Essential question after Dr. Bunyod's papers finds that only 3% of any of these models have led to a change in policy or any outcomes. And then we had a question from here. Yes.
Yeah, very briefly. So I just wanted to pick up what what Dr. Saab was saying in terms of wheat and how perhaps we could have about 6 to 7 million acre feet available to us, sir, if we enhance the productivity on that front. So coming back to you, so it's just more of a follow up in terms of what he has just said. How would your model change given what he said about wheat? Would you be willing to alter it so as to account for the lesser productivity of how we grow wheat? And secondly, how would the numbers change in terms of the high intensity sugarcane rice, nexus on that front? So just as a follow up to what he has said. Thank you.
Okay, do we have any other questions before we hand this over? Okay, please, one more question.
I was just talking about the climate smart agriculture, and the World Bank has spent $200 million for that. What's your perspective on that? What do you think that how much it's realistic, especially when it comes to the small farmers? Because we have already seen that whenever we take up the technology to resolve these problems, so this led towards increasing the inequality, income inequality. So what about that? What's your perspective? Thank you.
That's a question to Dr. Khalid. Okay, whoa, two more. And those are the last ones we take because otherwise we run out of time. Please. And please introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. My name is Hassam Abbasi and I'm also working for WWF Pakistan. So my question is that the data is the basic input of any model. So what are the challenges for a modeler while developing a WEF model or WEF-E model in terms of data availability as far as a developing country, Pakistan is concerned? So thank you.
Okay, and just behind you, there's the last.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Abdul Hakim. I'm an irrigation agronomist working with IMI. So my question is, since this morning we were hearing about short duration crops and how these short duration crops can pull more water into agriculture. So two things first from the modelers. So when you were considering about these, when you are taking into account, did you consider the induction of maize crop into the farming system in last 2 decades? We have seen the increase. And then another question from Dr. Saab. So do you think this short duration crops will again increase the water use by agriculture, which you suggested?
Sure, we can. That's actually a good idea. We go from back to front. Yeah, so please.
Okay, yes, there are examples. The wheat over last 50 years, the duration has gone down by almost 6 weeks. And at present, the average duration of wheat is 145 to 150 days, whereas we have genetics of 105 to 120 days, which is equally productive. The major transformation during last 10 years in the rice landscape is because of shorter duration rice. You know, the acreage under rice and production has gone up because of introduction of additional crop of rice. Okay, now soybean, which is alternate crop to maize all over the world, is yet to be introduced. And it is in Midwestern United States, Brazil and Argentina, on an average it's 120 to 140 days crop. Now most of the new genetics in soybean is 90 days. And all these MNCs which are selling GM maize, their major future thrust is less than 100 days maize and genetically modified. It's a thoroughly tested option. And in case of cotton, as I've already told you, that our 200 days cotton is a history, it cannot survive. And all recent breakthrough in cotton, whether it's in China, Australia, or Brazil, they're all 120 days or less. So it's something which is happening that we are not paying proper attention. But most importantly, so there's a genetics, in genetics we call it determinate habit. So moving from indeterminate to determinate habit, that's happening in case of canola. The indeterminate canola is again 140 days, determinate is 100 days. And they are not only more productive, but they are also climate resilient, because shorter the duration, lesser is the vulnerability.
Or did you want to quickly answer? Yeah.
I would like to answer a few of questions.
Okay,
Yeah,
please.
because the questions were a lot of questions are there. Induction of maize, data availability, then how to engage government with models. So one by one, as far as induction of maize is concerned, yes, we can actually have these type of models where we can, change the crops, change the cropping pattern, change the irrigation scheduling. So all these things can be, modeled over there. So that's not a big issue. We can actually, check for those new crops, as well as Dr. Ikrasa was also suggesting that we can also go for cotton and different crops as well, short duration, that it can be modeled. Regarding data availability, the guy, I think it's there. So yeah, it's very, challenging part, but I mean, we do have all the data sets in Pakistan. I mean, different agencies and different organizations are actually meant for collecting those data sets. That's a different story, that whether they are willing to, share it or not, but plenty of data is there. And then the rest, you can actually fill in the gaps using remote sensing and satellite products. It's really very much, now improved, and high resolution satellite products are available. Weather data is also available in abundance. I mean, you can go for ERA 5 and other these type of stuffs, and you can have a lot of data sets in it. Regarding, sir, engagement of government with the models, yes, you are right. In the morning, we were listening about the policy graveyards. A lot of policies have been, developed, but it's still, implementation is not up to that mark. Similarly, a lot of models, even for Indus Basin, we have heard about IBMR, we have heard about eSource. A lot of models are there. But again, what I was, when I was looking on those models, there was again missing that nexus links, like energy, and I mean, looking into the gap, the time of or the duration when it is moving from one barrage to another barrage. So that was time lag was also there in eSource and other models. So I mean, again, that's a nexus approach is required when we are making such models, and then we can actually convince the government, well, this type of model is there, in which you can actually account for your hydropower productions. You can account for different sort of changing in your cropping patterns. So food and these all things can happen, and then you can actually advocate to the government as well. Wow.
Okay, great. So I actually would like now to hear from Bunyot. So we need to give him the mic on the how to engage the government into with these modeling tools, so that we actually can really change some policy. And maybe if he has some suggestion on this question of climate change says this will happen, but whoops, we have more rain. Why is reality so often different from predictions and models? Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Claudia. Well, I am not really an expert. Like I said, the models that we're implementing, they're work in progress. But what we're learning in the process is the ownership of these models need to go to the government. So that's why it's very important to identify who will use these models. Because when we're talking about water, energy, food, environment nexus, it's not just one ministry. It's like across. And in different countries, it might be like one who can be more, has a role of coordination. So better collaboration with the other ministries, or like, for example, if it was in case of Uzbekistan, we're thinking that maybe it's the cabinet of ministers. So the with nexus type of decisions can be made at a very high level. So that's why it's important, maybe the river basins or the other organizations. So depending on the context, where these models will be used, who will have the ownership, and who will coordinate. So, yeah.
Okay. And about the climate question? No, someone else. Steve, I'm not asking you the climate question, but there was a question from you, if you would be willing to hand over the model talking about ownership and wheat.
Okay. I think in terms of ownership, I really think that you need a long-term liaison with the government, and the groups that do that the most systematically are the universities. I mean, UAF is over at the Punjab government. Somebody from there is there all the time. They have the capacity to run these models with some effort, and so that linkage, I mean, eventually in a developed country, you can put these models in the Economic Research Service and things like that. In Pakistan, the stage, it seems to me that the stage is better to start with the universities. And that would be, particularly those that have good links to provincial and federal governments. Can I just answer a few of these other ones?
Exactly, because it's the
okay,
last
without really answering direct questions. First, the environmental flows, we do have some of that. We have it below Kotri Barrage. We can turn that up and down, so we can force more water below Kotri Barrage, and we get an estimate of the impact on agricultural production. So that's at least a starting point. I would really like it to be a lot better in terms of the uses that are done below Kotri Barrage. I mean, I'd really like to expand our model so we calculated that. We also have salinity. We have saline and fresh acreage, but it doesn't change. It doesn't migrate and get worse or get better, which is something we could add, but it's been a challenge, basically. But we have a proxy for that. Now thinking of all these comments that everybody made, it seems to me turning around, okay, we've got a model where I had to go to 44% tax in sugarcane, but really the way to do that is just say that's the business as usual, or that's the bad news version. If we start getting lower crop water requirements, more efficient use of water in sugarcane, that all probably comes down. And we have lots of productivity, total factor productivity, a whole bunch of productivity measures that we can alternate, both to look at environmental issues as well as just general productivity. I would imagine, and actually we chose high levels of crop water requirements for these runs, which made disasters. but actually, Dr. Chima has lower ones that he's done with remote sensing, and we almost put those in. But if we put those in, I think things would change quite a bit, including how difficult it is to get water out of the system. What we haven't done at all is worked with duration. We have duration in the model, but they probably are 1980s durations that we just, that's a whole area of exploration that we should and could start. And then the wheat, raise productivity in wheat and see what happens. And so there's a lot we could do, and this is actually really helpful in that we can flip the thing on its head. We say we have one set of results. Let's try to do things to the system that make this better. And so we can beat the high cost of trying to remove acreage under the conditions that we're looking at now. So.
Okay, great. And now I think we have Dr. Yasmin's question to Dr. Khalid on the $200 million CSA program, and anything else both of you would like to comment on in those last 4 minutes.
Yes, I'm just going to keep it.
No. Okay, sorry, you have to keep it very short because we might have closing remarks.
Yeah, very, very short. So, I can't speak to the World Bank's initiative, but so Pakistan is currently, revising its agroecological zones. And so once once that is done, then that we'd be in a much better position to address some of the challenges that are emanating due to climate change. I'll just give you the example of drip irrigation that we've talked about. So yes, on paper it looks quite good, but the difficulties that we've had up till now is that it's very costly. It's very costly for farmers, who are at the lower end of the spectrum. So the progressive farmers are using drip irrigation and to good effect, but it's not been a success when it comes to the farmers who are not that well to do when things start out. The cost of equipment is high. There's capacity building that needs to happen. A lot of times farmers are using excess water now, primarily because for drip irrigation it meets their purpose, but now they think that they've got excess water. So all of those things that need to be addressed, and I guess I'll just go back to the point regarding universities. I think because we've got a number of universities across the agricultural area, I think students doing their master's and PhD thesis on these new initiatives vis-a-vis climate smart agriculture could be very helpful in terms of modifying future planning. Thank you.
Okay, excellent.
Yeah, I do agree with Dr. Khalid, but I think there's a lot of gap of the extension services because our small farmers, either they cannot, government have a lot of programs where they are providing subsidy on these irrigation systems, but unfortunately our small farmer, they don't have knowledge, first of knowledge, and as well as access to those irrigation technologies. And the failure of these drip irrigation is mostly lack of knowledge about these systems, and we need to enhance our extension services as well.
With this, our session on WEFE modeling a FED or the future is coming to an end. I'd like to thank again our presenters, our very exciting panel, our very engaged audience. And the 2-3 things I'd like to very quickly take away is overall future, more future than FED, but much more to be done on environmental systems, engagement with policymakers to actually achieve a policy change. But clearly the models seem to already be very good in terms of leading to some discussions, leading to other solutions. And I've also heard we definitely need to invest in agricultural research to get our genomes, our seed varieties and seed technologies improved very rapidly given climate change and other challenges. And so with this, I would like to just say thank you. And until next time, until we have our next NEXUS Gains webinar, and hopefully again also as part of Pakistan Water Week in the future. Thanks so much to everyone. Yeah.